Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I am your host. Alright, so we're going to start this off, and first and foremost, let's talk about the big news of the week, which is that apparently WB has gutted multiple divisions of DC Comics, from the actual publishing arm to the various entertainment subsidiaries, leading many to unemployment and to widespread worries and fears about the future of DC Comics as an actual entity. Some of the biggest shakeups have included many editors being laid off, including Andy Curry and Bob Harras, as well as Jim Lee being removed as publisher, although he is still seemingly with the company. On the media side, higher-ups at DC Universe streaming service have gone the axe and have caused rumors that the DC app will soon be folded and discontinued. A lot of the blame here is being held at the feet of AT&T, who bought out the corporation and are accused of doing this to lay the groundwork to pivot DC to simply being an IP factory with little to no real content output or dimension. And this is something that I could believe. This was much larger in scope than just a simple shakeup. It was a huge blow in many ways, and this is kind of coming off the heels of when Generation 1 was meant to semi-relaunch everything under the DO's direction. Now, if anyone remembers the history of New 52, that only really happened because folks like the DO and Lee and Harras were so under the gun by the last time corporate was trying to shutter DC Comics that they were able to convince them that a reboot would bring back sales and prestige. Generation 1 was very likely another attempt to stall off this eventuality, and it failed, and so DC could be a death's door. Hopefully not, but the outlook isn't good. Whatever the future might hold, at least we have the memories. Also in DC news, we're finally getting The Other History of DC Universe, a prestige miniseries that meant to be a Black Label miniseries, but has since been on indefinite hiatus for about 2 years now. I can't wait for that, it looks really good. And lastly, NYCC is going to be going full digital this year, taking cues from SDCC's attempt to do so, and I wish them the best. Alright, let's move on to what I read this week. First off, we have The Immortal Hulk, number 36, and this was a breezy issue, which isn't bad, but it's one that doesn't really meet the standards of the series as a whole, especially after such a landmark issue as last month's. Out of something like that, with the amount of impact and intensity that had, this one kind of falls short of capitalizing on it. In terms of pure visuals, Joe Bennett is still perfectly on form here, with body horror and inventiveness in design to spare. But in what actually happens, it leaves very little to be discussed or engaged with. It's all focused on major splash pages that eat up time and quicken the pace, rather than digging into the story or the narrative content that last month opened up. The biggest thing we get plot-wise is more confirmation on just how much of a douche the leader really is, as he roundly provides some of the most snidest and sneering commentary I have ever seen in a comic, and only amps up the desire for the morality to play out and for him to get his face punched in. That is going to be cathartic as fuck. It's not a terrible issue, but it's more something that seems to exist to create a bridge story-wise, to get the Hulk from point A to point B, to get Fry from this place to that, and have the characters make insanely dumb decisions that can only lead to more suffering. So par for the course. It's not the most engaging or entertaining issue, but I'll leave it to the Myth arc to see where this goes. Overall, 2 thumbs middle. Next up we have Billionaire Island number 4. This is maybe the perfect Russell issue. It's got all of his hallmarks and basically none of his flaws. It's Russell in his safe zone, but it's a zone that he knows well and knows how to navigate. Prosaic, barbed, and acidic one-liners, set pieces, and gags all abound. He's just lobbying them out to the reader with no care or concern, and it's wonderful. It makes for an issue that is satisfyingly rich in humor, commentary, and most of all, horrifyingly effective pathos. Seriously, Russell does not let up at all in terms of just being incredibly dark, with the disturbing background and motivations he gives the main villains and obstacles. It's some supremely fucked up shit, and it's doing its wonderful job at making those villains and the world they've propped up around themselves pitch perfectly hateable, and makes the eventual recapitulation that more sweet to anticipate. Or maybe not. Maybe Russell will just go straight to the dark. At this point, I believe he could do that. But yeah, insanely funny issue that makes some really cutting remarks and observations that is top form, with an oddly sentimental and emotional bent to it as well. It's a satisfying read. Overall, thumbs up. And lastly, we have Green Lantern Earth 1 Volume 2. This has to be one of my most anticipated sequels to any of DC's standalone graphic novels in a long time, and did not disappoint. This has to be one of the most enjoyable reads I've had with a Green Lantern release since maybe the first few issues of Morrison's run, or definitely since Humphrey's run. For continuation of a story that kind of took the mythos and the characters in different directions, with a softy, Kilowog, or the non-existent of the emotional spectrum, and being set in a semi-future, the first volume had this painstaking task of making sure the tone, dynamics, and the heart of Green Lantern were still there, and Volume 2 continues and improves on this merit. Hal is more seasoned, but is still a force of nature when he sets his mind to something. His relationship with Carol deepens and gains more of the classic layers fans have come to really respect. And the narrative of pushing the determination and willpower of the corps as a whole is played to the hilt. Maybe not literally, because there's still no emotional spectrum, but pushing the individual loyalties, courage, and strength of the members against the onslaught of Yellow Lanterns, and social political intrigue is done in a way that is more interesting and more engaging than it should be. The creative team develops a story that is easy to become invested and enthralled in. As the characters become more rounded out, more sympathetic, and more relatable, so too does the tragedy and the drama of their situation. It's not an altogether blockbuster action set-piece fest, but it's something that really hones in on character and personality. Kilowog, Sinestro, Jon Stewart, the Evil Guardian, who might as well be Scar, and surprisingly the Cordians all get moments that bring out humanity, their vulnerability, their passion, regret, or even just their imposing natures. And for 144 pages, it tells a story that feels complete, whole, and substantial. Although a few moments do feel rushed or added in, or even a bit padded, it's something that I believe will stand the test of time. With all the fears surrounding DC right now, graphic novels like this, or Earth 1 in general, might become extinct. And if so, Green Lantern Earth 1 Volume 2 sticks the landing. It doesn't end on a whimper, it completes itself, and it does leave you hoping for more. Overall, 2 thumbs up. Moving on to what I watched this week, we have, first off, Stargirl Episode 13, Stars and Stripes Part 2. This was awful. Well, not entirely, but it's insanely underwhelming and underwritten for what should have been a focused, engaging, thought-out finale. It's got all the intensity and purpose of a filler episode. It's hard to put into words what exactly went wrong, because so much did. It's a finale that doesn't care about character arcs, closure, or catharsis. Let's all that go to the wayside in favor of weird, unsatisfying quips and melodrama, which is a far cry from where it could have been, and where it has sometimes reached. The small threads that were carrying the conflict into the finale are just swept under the rug. And that's a shame because that's where the excitement of finale comes from. The passion, the energy, that's where it stems. Just sidestepping and then making jokes about the sidestepping doesn't make up for it. There's nothing to grasp onto here, and the show knows it. There's no drama, there's no stakes, and there's no engagement without taking any of this seriously. And for some reason, the show just doesn't. I won't be following this on to the CW next season, and it's unfortunate that it wasn't even able to do justice to its first season. Overall, 2 thumbs down, and a season score of 4 out of 10. And lastly, we have Doom Patrol Episode 9, Wax Patrol. It's really lucky of Doom Patrol that this climactic penultimate episode that they had shot before production shut down actually works like a season finale. It has this great sense of building dread and drama that only reaches a crescendo in the final scenes, but by that point it reached such a pitch that the stakes it's realized feel immense. Enough that you kind of buy that it would take a season break to figure it all out. It's kind of a good comparison to the finale of Titans' first season, which also lost its finale. But while that one ended on a very flat, uneventful whimper, this one lays waste to the Doom Patrol both physically, mentally, and emotionally. It sets the stage for a reprisal, and that's a good foundation for another season to start on. What really makes this episode though is Diane Guerrero, whose flashback sequences and Miranda are some of the finest acted in the entire series, and a high mark for her as a whole. I was enthralled and utterly gutted by the heartbreaking narrative they presented. She's the MVP this season without a doubt, which is honestly a huge improvement from how insufferable I found her in the first season at times. Not bad, but not as good as the rest, and this season definitely cements her as being another feather in this show's cap. The main plot is still a bit more goofy, a tad more wacky, but it kind of winds down when it takes on this frantically dark swerve that brings it all home. It's a shame we won't get a proper conclusion for some time, but for what this had, it made it count. Overall, 2 thumbs up, and overall season score of 8 out of 10. Can't wait for next season, I really can't. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm so grateful that anyone listens. It means so much to me. And next week, without any new releases in terms of what to watch, I will be asking for questions, so be on the lookout for that. So again, thank you for listening. I want to give a shout out to the cover artists at DOTEMCE. Please check them out. They're amazing. Hope you have a great week, and see you again next time.